Hello, and welcome to the David Todd Miller Podcast. I'm your host, David Todd Miller. This podcast is about fitness, nutrition, having a positive mindset, and how to optimize the human performance as well as the human experience. This podcast is also about developing a never say die attitude, living a life of positivity and passion, and most of all, having hope. How's it going, everybody? So today we have on a special guest, my great friend Dave Jones. Dave and I went to Southeast Missouri State University together. Shout out to everybody in the Midwest. I'm on the East Coast right now, but Dave is also a Midwest guy, and he was my partner in crime with like group training. Had a lot of great experiences going through college with him, and he is also a member of the Armed Forces, military branch being the Army. And so we're just going to kind of talk a little bit today about fitness, nutrition, a little bit of how military played into kind of how he went about fitness and got ready for everything. So we're just going to kind of start at square one. Dave, where were you born, and kind of, go from that into the military, if you would.
I grew up in Arkansas and joined the military when I was 17. I served 11 years in the military. I immediately saw the benefits of staying in shape while I was going through my training. The military stresses important to physical fitness, especially in dire life-threatening scenarios. For example, your buddy goes down and you have to drag him or her to safety, but you're either too winded or you just lack the strength to even just move him, because most of the time you're carrying a lot of gear, and that really got me into like strength training and wanting to train other soldiers.
Okay. So just from like a practical standpoint.
Yeah. I mean that was very that was right off the bat. That was a very important thing to realize, and some soldiers don't pick up on it as soon or take it as serious. Especially like younger soldiers.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, sure. As most people, have to encounter that kind of scenario in their lives. Not usually, but it would be nice to have the ability to physically overcome that kind of obstacle that you're faced with it.
I mean, you guys carry quite a bit of gear too, right? How much gear do you think you're carrying?
Oh man, sometimes I've carried anywhere between 60 to 80 pounds of stuff if you count like body armor and helmets and your boots, your uniform, your weapon, your ammo, your vest. Plus, a lot of times you're carrying like if you drag somebody, you're dragging them and whatever they're wearing too.
So you essentially got to carry your own body weight, their body weight, plus roughly an average of $140.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
And you might use the terrain to help you, or you might be able to slide your buddy on gravel, which will move a lot easier. But then if you're in mud, you're hardly ever not going to get much traction. So I've dealt with a lot of different terrain, and you really need to have that strength. Sure, when in life or death situation, you get the adrenaline going, but it's pretty important to be able to do it.
I hadn't even thought of like the being on any kind of like mud or gravel or anything like that. You always picture you're moving a lot of weight, but you're on nice solid ground and good to go.
Yeah. I've done some exhausting training scenarios in mud where you're doing like a litter, an Aiden litter, where you got like 4 people carrying, somebody that's average of 2 to 240 pounds for maybe like a mile.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, that might be a little extreme and maybe, unrealistic in most scenarios, but just it has happened before in combat where they've been carried for really long distances.
Gotta get out to the safe zone for the helicopter, right?
Right, exactly.
Gotta get to the LZ, right?
Yep. So just from the physical, just life-threatening situation, training helps out, and to be a life or death situation.
So when you were training for that, what kind of were you doing, more Olympic lifting or like a CrossFit style or just kind of old school bodybuilding?
Um, so I usually take a I guess, faceted approach where, you're definitely the running and sprints. Sometimes you gotta run up there and quick and, uh, I guess use that energy pathway to get the job done. And then sometimes when you got the long distances, you gotta have that too. So really a good mix of short sprint training plus long endurance training. There's not really one size fits all, but I did do a lot of say endurance training for like higher rep squats, deadlifts, just build overall mass and gets you kind of prepared to like just moving a large amount of weights in general.
So when you would do that kind of training, did you adjust your nutrition? I know in the military they you got like the MREs, but did they kind of let you have a little leeway, or did they say this is what you got to eat, and that may be enough fuel for you, or it may not?
Yeah, so like when you're in training, a lot of times you are limited to what they provide. From a military standpoint, they provide you everything that you need, but from a more educational background standpoint, I guess you've just got to try to make the best decisions with what options you have, and instead of going for those really sweet stuff that may be available, maybe you can trade some of the junk food that comes in the MRE for some more healthier options. Because there's always going to be soldiers that they want the sweets or junk food or whatever, and they'll gladly trade you.
Yeah.
And if that's an option, then take advantage of it. It's not really helping them out, but honestly, if they can get a hold of it, they're going to do whatever they're going to get it from somewhere. So, um,
In the food that you had, did you feel like it gave you enough energy to do what you were doing, or did you feel constantly hungry, or you're just like throwing them
um,
back?
I mean, looking back on it, I felt like it's quite a bit or quite often not satisfied with the amount of food, or if you may have enough food or in the MRE for that particular training day, but sometimes you're just limited on time and you just pick and choose what provides the most amount of calories in the shortest amount of time. Stuff that's easier to eat, or you forgo warming it up with the water heaters or whatever, and just eating stuff cold, and that way you have more time to eat more, to intake more calories.
Gotcha. Um, I remember a while back you saying something that, um, something to the fact that you were burning just so many calories that it felt like you're just always hungry, and how much do you think you're burning a day?
Again, it goes to depending on what you're doing. I mean, if you start a 5 o'clock regiment, say you start the day off with a mandatory 2 to 4 mile run, then you immediately start doing tactical training, entering clearing rooms, and maybe you switch to more live scenarios where you're getting bombarded with dummy grenades and you have to go assault buildings and these compounds. I mean, some of these raids and stuff can take 2, 3 hours out of your day, and then
Man,
especially if you gotta do say land navigation to get there, so you're just walking and running like say a whole day. I mean, I think could add up, uh, you know, several thousand calories, no problem.
jeez.
That's why I've eaten 3,000 calories before and just still feel like I'm starving. At the end of the day.
And all that training, you're still wearing that 70 pounds of gear too, right?
Yeah, yeah. Most of the time you're still wearing your armor. Yeah, because if you don't wear it, then you're not getting conditioned to carry it.
So after a while, you did it feel more or less just kind of like a heavy coat, or
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
still kind of notice it.
Yeah, actually, it does become quite comfortable when you start wearing it all the time. I mean, not everybody looks at it that way, but um, you do definitely adjust for it. I'm sure you're going to get aches and pains when you first start just because that the extra load that you're carrying, but you do adjust to it and becomes like kind of second nature, and you can start jogging with it and feel pretty comfortable wearing it.
Okay, I can see that. So how would you say your exercise and nutrition has changed outside of the military? I know, back when we were in college, you were still in great shape, um, definitely aerobically, and the few times we've talked about strength training, you said you were, I forget the multiple, but it was pretty impressive from your body weight. It's like a 1.5 or a 2, something like that.
Oh, are you referring to like maybe a specific lift or say like a bench press
I
or
think
deadlift?
so. Like pound for
Yeah,
pound, you were really strong.
yeah. Back then I was around 150 to 155, and bench was up to 260. I think that's a 1.67 times my body weight on
Pretty good
bench.
ratio.
Yeah, because I was also doing a lot of endurance training too for, say, military wise. 102 push-ups in 2 minutes is pretty high standard while also maintaining a high level of, um, I guess power, your 1 rep max or 2 rep max. Um, Maintaining that is very difficult and requires a significant amount of discipline and pretty good like nutrition based diet.
Would you
I would
say?
say,
Sorry, go ahead.
but no, you can go ahead and ask your
I was just
question.
gonna ask. Was it just when you say a lot of discipline? Was it just a lot of frequency, a lot of upkeep? You're just knocking them out multiple times a day, or at least every day, or what was kind of your training for both the 1.67 and the push-ups?
So yeah, the records, they were actually held consistently or together. The 102 push-ups in 2 minutes and the bench press were both around the same period of time. And the training approach that I took was twice a week, working on those the target muscles for those exercises, and just getting a good mix of say you start off with your standard bench press and then incline, decline, pretty standard way of training for strength. But then you also move to say dumbbells and uh, higher reps mixed in with the heavier weights. And at the end of it, I always do like a burnout and do say a set of push-ups and then push-ups on my knees and then push up off a bench, and sometimes I'll even do push-ups off the wall where I'm just can barely push myself off, and just getting that good mix of training went a long way. I think a lot of discipline that people overlook is sting, overlook the amount of rest time required when you're doing such a program. So when I say say 2 times a week, you're not doing all those lifts on both of those days. You can kind of mix and match and have a heavier day versus a lighter day on the second day of the week.
On the heavier days, how many reps are you shooting for? Is it more like a 3 or 4? And on the higher days, are you shooting upwards of like 30 or 50, or is it just kind of until you hit failure?
Yeah, so on the heavier days, I always stuck around, so I don't know, maybe between 4 and 8, because you also want that muscle growth in there too. I think the research that I've done is the lower the reps, the less muscle growth that you'll get from it. So you're trying to just be well rounded and have that muscle growth, which will eventually turn into more strength. So I was trying to get a good balance there because of uh, the requirement to move your own body weight when it comes to like doing push-ups and stuff like. So didn't want to focus too heavily on like a 1 rep max, but the strength came regardless. So it kind of worked into my favor. So endurance, when it comes to more of the endurance, I stuck, I think, anywhere between 15 and 25 on average for reps, and then just burning yourself out at the very end.
Okay. And at the very end, you mean just like that last set?
Yeah, just the last set, maybe the last two. For instance, I mentioned the push-ups and no real target number at the very end. Just do as many push-ups as you can and then make it a little easier. Kind of like a drop set, doing a drop set. Say dumbbell curls and just going from, let's say, a 30 to 25 to a 20 to 15, 10, etc. till you're done. And then that's the last thing that you do and then call it quits.
Okay. How would you say your nutrition changed once you were able to just kind of have free for all? You weren't on the MREs or the quote unquote chow.
Nutrition is I think it's changed quite a bit over the years. I've always been very I guess aware of eating the right foods. That's kind of subjective to depends on who you talk to and what nutrition books and schools that you go to. But in general, just avoid the sugar, carbs, that kind of thing is the probably the most helpful approach that I took was getting away from all this stuff that you've like, okay, I really don't need this stuff that can make me kind of lethargic and hold me back. And eventually I got to a point where it was super strict and so far that even condiments like ketchup and barbecue sauce and that stuff that has a little extra sugar, I was just eliminating as much as I could. And it really started making me feel better and just overall more energetic. But then again, you have to compensate those calories that you're losing from stuff that you typically would eat. You start having to start eating more of the raw foods and stuff to kind of get those calories back, but more of a and gain more of a positive result from it. So it's not something that you can do overnight, especially with a Western diet. You grow up on grandma feeding you chicken and dumplings or fried food or
Yeah.
whatever, and so you get accustomed to this, these bad foods, so to speak, in your life. So you just don't want to kind of quit cold turkey overnight because a lot of times those diets they don't stick with you. So let's say it took about a year to have this overall nutritional overhaul, I guess you'd say, to really start noticing huge changes.
Okay. And so are you going like no carb or is it just like cutting out the sugar, but you're still having like sweet potatoes, oatmeal, that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Just so no one like the way I usually train or have someone else train is like the whole highly restricted diet doesn't generally work for the average, person, I guess. 9 to 5 worker. It doesn't work out every single day. Doesn't do competition or play sports. Just for a typical American, if you will. That kind of approach doesn't really work the best because people they notice they want to have some kind of happiness in their life, and a lot of times they rely on food. So cutting out all carbs, well, it's not really the right answer, but again, like you're mentioning, oatmeal and stuff like that is a fruits and vegetables. It's a better way of looking at carbs instead of saying all carbs are bad with say sugar.
I've tried a ketogenic diet probably like 5 or 6 times, and initially
Hmm.
I feel pretty good mentally, but then my performance will go down, and they always say that there's like the adaptation phase for the your body to run on fat more or less, and I've never really been able to get to a point where I can keep that high intensity, which makes sense. You're running off of glucose during that time, so I've kind of gotten to the point where I think almost like a targeted ketogenic diet is really good. Just have a little bit of carbs right before your workout, assuming you're doing a high intensity and not just kind of like walking on the treadmill or going for a jog outside. And then the rest of the day, just kind of having like a good amount of protein. Probably too much for a true ketogenic diet, but keeping the carbohydrates low. And when I've done that, I've had pretty good mental clarity. No large fluctuations in energy and that kind of thing. And I think when people are wanting to, um, kind of have that food as either like a recreational or a social or just kind of a pick me up. Um, Carbohydrates are definitely one of those. Going to like it'll elicit serotonin that'll make you feel good.
Hmm.
So I've tried to dabble and find alternatives that are lower calorie, because that's usually what hurts most people, is that the ones that taste the best are usually the worst for you because it has a lot of sugar, a lot
Right,
of overall
absolutely.
calories, and usually it's a mixture of,
Not overeating.
yeah, it's just really palatable. It tastes really good, and so it's easy to eat a lot of it. Um, and so I feel like there's things out there, like fruit. Fruit's a great alternative. That it's I remember coming across and reading that it's like nature's candy, and especially
Right.
if you you can make like a shake out of just simply like a banana or ice cream. It's kind of what I was thinking. You can get a banana, maybe some non-fat
A little vanilla.
non-fat milk, or like some almond milk, coconut milk, and maybe like a scoop of chocolate protein powder, and you've got chocolate banana uh, ice cream that's more or less tastes very similar to what you might eat and have eaten 400 or 500 calories with, and this might only be like 150, 200.
Right, exactly. I actually starting to do that with my daughter. I have a 7-year-old daughter that I'm trying to get into more of a nutritional mindset. It's kind of hard with a child, but I was like, hey, do you want to make some homemade ice cream? So really, all I did was 2 frozen bananas, a little bit of vanilla, and that was enough. That was enough.
That,
Maybe a
that, that
little
did the
cinnamon or
trick.
something. Yeah, I think it's the texture that for a child, they kind of correlate that with a ice cream texture. So she was much more happy with it mixed up like that than eating the banana by itself.
Yeah.
So start them off young. I think that's the best approach. But yeah, definitely finding ways to get around those sweet tooth cravings with fruit, and better way to go than grabbing a Snickers or
Something
however else
crazy
you
like
want
that.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'll add is like a natural sweetener, like a whole earth or a
Mhm.
Truvia, or just straight stevia, and that's usually enough sweetness that whatever I would have had, yeah,
Satisfies.
it would have satisfied
Yeah.
whatever I would have had that was just straight sugar.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask you to make a transition here
Okay.
into kind of get your opinion on. So I've been reading a little bit about cooking raw vegetables, and I've been wanting to just get more up to par with cooking and trying to figure out like the science behind it. But I've done a lot of reading about cooking with raw vegetables. Do you know like cooking some vegetables, it destroys vitamin C, but uh, it's plentiful in most diets, so it's really not a huge issue. But when, say, cooking tomatoes, it actually boosts the amount of lycopene. And the reason why cooking some vegetables is better for you is because the cell walls of the vegetables, they break down these thick walls and aids in nutrient absorption in the body. Say, for instance, foods to consider maybe, say, carrots, spinach, mushrooms, cabbage, pumpkins, definitely asparagus, peppers, and there's several others that you can consider. But just wondering what your thoughts are.
I for a long time I just ate straight raw vegetables. I thought,
Mm.
uh, this is how it's always been. This is how Mr. Caveman would have done it, and that I've always tried to take the approach that what would have our ancestors and our bodies, because we really haven't evolved a lot since that era.
Yeah.
And so I always have tried to keep it more or less like that, but taking into account the science. And so I've started doing a lot more cooking of my vegetables as well. I still need to look into like the microwave debate, but as far as I've read and heard, it's not that big a deal. So I'll actually microwave a lot of my vegetables just to
Hmm.
the point that they're kind of like a bright green. For example, if it's broccoli, and for the same reason to break down that cell wall for better absorption. But I've also read, kind of like what you said as well, that you don't want to with certain vegetables. So it's kind of almost like, which is kind of annoying that you can't. It's not just a one, a one fix all. You can't just
Right.
nuke everything,
Kind of
or
see
cook
what you're
everything.
gaining from the vegetable while you're eating it. It more
Yeah,
comes into the scientific approach. It might be a little more than some people are willing to put effort into, but if you really want to fine tune the diet, I mean, it's definitely something you want to consider how you're cooking the vegetable. I'll throw on a reference here. So, according to let's see, Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry stated that boiling is the best way to preserve the antioxidant and still cook them properly.
I could see that.
Uh,
And
a lot of people refer to say boiling versus steaming, but according to this journal, they were saying boiling, which is contradictory to several other research articles I've read. So it's kind of a difficult.
it's like a
Um,
gray zone, and there's
yeah,
some people
yeah,
that say, you want to boil it, you want to make sure you do it this way, and other people are like, no, no, don't do that. So it's confusing, and I've I'll if I boil my vegetables, what I'll do is, and I think this is kind of what they might have been uh, referring to, or maybe um, saying indirectly, is that like if you boil the vegetables, that especially if you do it to a certain extent, you're gonna overdo it, right? So that's one thing you definitely
right.
want to do is overcook it, but it'll start to because you're breaking down the cell wall, it'll start to leach out into the water, right? And so what I thought was, heck, well, I don't think anything's going to be evaporating unless it's just water vapor and steam. But I could definitely see maybe I overcooked a little bit of it, or maybe even if it's not overcooked, maybe something is kind of leaching out into the water. And so what I'll do is, let everything cool off. I'll take the vegetables, eat it, but I'll actually take the water that I cooked it in and put it in a cup and either just drink it straight or mix it in with like a decaf green tea or something like that, and try and make like like a Iron Man kind of super super green drink.
Yeah, that's a great idea. You can even might even be able to take it another step and maybe make soup or something else out of it too.
Definitely.
That's definitely a good approach to take. Just with everything in moderation, even just the cooking temperature and stuff like that. Some people like their stuff super soft, but I mean, what's the point in eating it if you're not gonna get the health benefit from it? So maybe just having a slight crunch,
Yeah.
just kind of stopping whatever method you use, just you know, to be aware that there is a certain point that you need to stop cooking that to retain all those nutrients.
My favorite way is pan. I hate it's bad to say, but like pan searing it, put in with a little bit
Hmm.
of like coconut oil, and just put it in the pan almost to the point that it starts to get like a little bit of gold to it. And you know, I don't know for sure. I haven't looked it up, but I would think that that's starting to damage the cell to the point that
Hmm.
maybe I'm losing nutrition at that point, especially if you burn it. Um, I mean that one's definitely tasting the best. If someone were to come to me and say, "Hey, I want," I don't really mind vegetables, but like I want it softer. I'd probably tell them, "Hey, cook it and then just put it in a blender, and then you can just kind of almost use it as like maybe a sauce or something like that." You have to have a pretty good blender, but that way you can kind of get that more mushiness to it. Um, It'll be a little bit easier to get down. And it depends on the vegetable. Like cucumbers. I got a couple of clients that I train that they'll say, I really like having like, French fries or something like that. And it's like, you can have French fries if you're at a lot for the calories, but it's not the best. It's not the most optimal way to go. So you want to go,
Right.
have like cucumbers or something like that, slice them real thin, and bake it. And that point, it's nice and crispy. You've kind of or maybe like a dehydrator or like a air fryer. Haven't tried that, but I think that would work pretty good. Put it in like an air fryer, and then put just like a little bit of like sea salt on it, and you have like essentially a potato chip. If you want to slice it real thin, you can have
Yeah,
like French fries,
satisfy that. I think that mental
kind of like that crunch factor.
craving for yeah, exactly. That's actually a pretty good idea too. One thing that I've done, I've trained. Oh man, I've had over 300, first assessments with several, with clients, and almost every one of them, I kind of stepped back here, covered stuff like basic movements, squat, and kind of similar deadlift type movements, and then always spend a few minutes on nutrition. And most people, they don't have no idea where to start, and they just think it's overwhelming. But when I try to simplify my training with my clients in the beginning, is like, hey, whatever can get them started, go with it, and then continue to build on that. So if they prefer one cooking method over the other, but it gets them started on vegetables, then by all means, hey, sear it a little bit, and then maybe try to transition down the road to more, boiling or steaming um, methods. Just get them started and get them interested in, eating healthier foods, and then try to make a transition later on instead of overwhelming them with all these specific steps from the beginning.
I think that's a really good point, and they say the best diet is the one that you can stick to, because
Mm-hmm.
there's so many out there that it can be overwhelming, and it can be discouraging for sure. Like, okay, doctor so and so said that this diet was going to be, the cure all for losing weight or feeling better, and you try it and it just doesn't go the way that you want it to.
Yeah.
And so I think, just like everybody is different from another person, unless they're a twin, um, at least from a genetic standpoint of, taste preference and whatnot, and how food affects energy and mood and whatnot, that it's very individual. And so you kind of have to tinker around. You can kind of set guidelines and parameters. You want to stick with something that's really nutrient dense, that is going to provide, if it's a vegetable or a carbohydrate, a good amount of fiber with it. That it hasn't been processed, so it doesn't have any added chemicals like margarine or any of those like partially or
Mm-hmm.
fully hydrogenated oils. And so I think, kind of going to like a nutrition uh, foundation is just to have plenty of variety, nutrient dense, and I think that's you're good to go from there. Make sure you get enough protein throughout the day, and then gradually find out what makes you feel the best, and also results in the best decrease for health risk. If you're eating one way for 3 months and you do a blood test and you come back and you have, your blood lipid panels are real bad, and then you try another one that you feel equally as good on, and your health markers are much improved, then that's a better diet for you.
Yeah. So it's good that it's point out that you mentioned the mood factor. I think that's quite often overlooked. I actually have a friend that's as a dietitian and goes to a school of, like, say, metaphysics, and then they is, mind, body, and spirit kind of thing. And her approach that she uses a lot of times is like, yes, definitely try to take the scientific and nutritional value out of things, but also kind of like listen to your body and just focus on how you feel that day or the next day after eating something. And from that awareness, she's been able to not necessarily self-diagnose, but uh, pinpoint errors in her diet that she would say yogurt. A lot of times yogurt, it's really good for somebody, but after taking I don't know, like, notes of how her diet's making her feel, she went and get additional tests, and come to find out she has her body is against taking yogurt. And so really just start being more aware of what you're eating, and kind of keeping track for a little bit and see how it makes you feel. I think it can go a long way.
Was she lactose intolerant, or was it yogurt specifically?
I think it was yogurt specifically. Yeah, I think I don't know if it's the bacteria in it or not, but it was. She's definitely able to eat, say, cheese and milk.
That's interesting. I
Yeah,
wonder how she would respond if she had like kefir or something like that that had probiotics as well, and the
yeah.
bacteria.
I'm not sure, but it's definitely an interesting approach, and I do know that it's been such a long time since my whole idea of like cheat day ends up being a one cheat meal, and then cheat meal now is, I don't know. See, I would consider a bowl of cereal a dessert, like a cheap dessert.
Definitely.
It's not even anything this extreme now. But say the last time I've eaten, say, I don't know, boneless wings or something, it just makes me feel crap.
Yeah,
It's not. It's just you gotta listen to your body and realize the effects that food's gonna have on it. It's kind of hard to do if that's all you eat all the time. But if you start eating clean and then introduce new things, or see good food versus bad food in your body, you'll definitely notice changes.
definitely, definitely. And you're better than me, Dave. I'll go. It usually is only maybe once a month or once every 2 months, but I'll go and I'll have like an epic cheat meal. It'll just be one meal. I'll try to do it like early in the day. Sometimes it's at night, but like I'll knock out like a pizza and a half, or like go out to like a restaurant and just clear the place. But I definitely feel it the next day as well. I'll feel it an hour later. You just feel usually. I don't know if it's just because it's the amount of food that I'm eating, but I suspect it's the amount of food, but also how,
Yeah, some
um,
injection.
yeah, just the body, inflammation and whatnot. Like,
Yep.
if I have I love Papa John's pizza, but like I said, I'll maybe have it once a month because I know I'll wake up the next day and it looks like someone just socked me in the face, and I was just like, man, what
Yeah.
the heck happened? And it's probably a lot of things that you get at a restaurant or something like that has a lot of salt, just packed full of
Mhm.
salt, and the table salt that you have nowadays has aluminum in it, and that causes a lot of inflammation in the body. So you're kind of giving a 1-2 punch with inflammation, and so I'll wake up, looks like a Mr. Potato Face, um, and it probably takes a day or two to kind of feel back to normal. Energy's down, even though I just had all these calories. And kind of on the flip side of the coin is, every now and then I'll do, usually on those days following, I'll just do a 24-hour fast to say, okay, well, I'll do feast famine, because I've seen a lot of benefits for uh, cardiovascular health, dropping or decreasing the risk for heart disease or cardiovascular disease by 20. I think I saw one study that was 25%. Just doing that once a month. And I was like, okay, well, that can be kind of my routine. That way I can kind of have, my cake and eat it too, no pun intended.
All right.
And so I'll kind of do that. I'll kind of do a feast famine where, I'll eat a ton in the next 24 hours. I'll just uh, have water, maybe a little bit of coffee or something like that. And I think recently the longest that I went, I was just trying to see how it was going, how far I could push it, and I got to about 42 hours um, without having anything to eat. And for the most part, I felt pretty good. It was almost kind of weird. I had done it before. I got to 29 hours or so, and after about like 18 hours, I really just didn't feel hungry, which was weird. It was almost the longer I went fasting, my body just kind of got used to it. And at that 42 hours, I still really wasn't that hungry. I was just like, I know I should eat something, kind of especially
Right.
for protein, because I'm not bringing in amino acids and that kind of thing. But
Now,
um,
were you training during this? Were you doing kind of like exercise program, or were you just doing these on like, say, you're during your off time?
the for I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. I was getting ready for a photo shoot, and I was doing I did a 24-hour fast like 3 days in a row. I'd wake up, train real hard, and then probably about an hour or two later have just a huge meal, and same thing. I wouldn't eat the rest of the day, go to bed, wake up, train and eat. And I did that for about 3 days in a row, and energy level wasn't as good, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Um, and then the 29-hour fast worked out. I could feel it. I tried it on a light day and it just did not go in my favor. And then the 42-hour one, I did a workout. I think it was like an upper body and just kind of a little bit slower pace metabolic circuit, and it went pretty well. I mean, I'd say maybe like a 80-90% performance, but the second day I was not feeling up to a workout, and just kind of went about my day. Still had decent energy level for talking or training clients or walking around the city and whatnot, but it wasn't anything. Um, it wasn't enough energy that I felt like if I were to try another workout, it would be beneficial. So I just rested on that second
Right.
day.
Now, as far as your water intake, did that change during this period, or did you kind of rely on that to maybe satisfy a little bit of your hunger, or
I,
what
you
kind of
know,
approach did you take?
Going into it, I thought, well, if I get hungry, I'm just going to chug a lot of water. But it actually was kind of the opposite. I had to really force myself, especially the longer that went on to have fluids, because I wasn't thirsty either, which was kind of odd. Um, but yeah, I mean, I made sure I had enough water. Still probably having about the same that I would normally have, probably close to a gallon or maybe a little bit less a day. But it wasn't like when I was eating where I'd be like, oh man, I'm so thirsty. I got to get a cup of water. Even during the workout. So I don't know really if that was just kind of a personal thing or if that's common or what, but that was kind of my.
Wonder if it has to, wonder if it has to do with what still intake water is still a digestion process that uses energy. Maybe it's your you know do you think it's a body's natural way of saying, kind of maybe a deterrent, um, to kind of save your energy because of lack of food or something?
Uh, Possibly. And then I kind of wonder. I follow this other guy, Thomas DeLauer, on YouTube. He's the what he talks about is pretty good detail, based on science. And disclaimer off of his disclaimer is like you don't want to do this, and it's really only done under clinical scenarios.
Mhm.
But he was talking about dry fasting, where you will actually break down body fat, um, because you're getting hydrogen, I believe hydrogen molecules or atoms, and it's combining with the oxygen that you're breathing, and it's making water. And it's supposed to be like the most pure water that you can have in your body. So I kind of wonder if later on that's what started happening. If maybe
Mhm.
I was having a reaction where the fat was being broken down to the point that it was combining with the air that I was breathing and making water, and for that reason I just didn't have as much. Or maybe it had nothing to do with that, and it was just because I wasn't eating, maybe I wasn't bringing enough salt in, that it wasn't stimulating somewhere in the brain to say, hey, you need to drink some water. But I recognized that, and just made a point of consuming some throughout the day.
Yeah, well, that's definitely an interesting. Um, I haven't ever heard that before because I'm very much into, man, hydrate. The army when he says hydrate or die kind of thing.
It's a big
So
one.
yeah, yeah. So I definitely, like you said, a disclaimer here. Make sure you're under a physician's control, and definitely probably not recommended to
Yeah, I don't
your
recommend it
average
either.
person, right? Anything that forces you to dehydrate or anything like that is
It's hard on the system.
probably not the best approach, right?
Yeah, definitely not recommended, but maybe
Right.
just kind of theorizing out loud that maybe that's why I wasn't as thirsty. But um, I would suspect more on the side of just because I wasn't having food, that my body didn't need as much fluid to maybe break it down or digest it or transport the nutrients. All those kind of reasons.
Yeah, it definitely gives you kind of, it's food for thought, as to how amazing the body is and what it does to get what it needs.
So
to
very,
survive.
very resourceful.
Right, absolutely. All right, sounds good. This is a good time. It's good to cover these things. I definitely look forward to the next time we can chit chat.
Likewise. So thanks once again to Dave Jones. Also, thanks to Natural Machine Nutrition, who sponsored this podcast today. If you guys are interested in natural products such as whey protein powder, go ahead and check them out at naturalmachinenutrition.com. And if you guys have any questions to me or possibly to David himself, I can definitely make sure that he gets the question. But feel free to reach out at info@davidtoddmiller.com, and I'll be happy to do what I can. Also, if there's a specific podcast or person that you would like me to interview, go ahead and send that as well. We'll do as much as I can, and we got more on the way for sure. So stay tuned until next time, and until then, have fun, enjoy every moment of life, go out there, live your passion, and most of all, have hope. This is David Miller, out.